prominent heads of various multinational corporations. The idea was to fetch as much the kind of presentation that was given at Davos. The Prime Minister was very categorically explained now the law and order situation is very much in control. And other than that, though we have suffered a lot, but we are on the right track. And when you talk about 2020 onwards, things would be a lot better for Pakistan. A lot of countries have shown interest to be a part of CPEC, and that is absolutely going to be a game changer, not only for Pakistan, but for the entire region. So at the same time, the Indian Premier also showed his reservation with the Chinese counterpart while he said that, well, certain area has been used that is a disputed area, according to him, that is part of India. And that is the reason they have got concerns with CPEC. So we'll talk about that as well. But other than that, when you look at the changing trends, if you just look at the last 30 years or so, there are a couple of models, business models which the countries have adopted in order to be a part of that globalization process. The model is of Russia, China, and then you talk about India also. Though Pakistan is a smaller economy, yet according to certain analysts, we did miss the train, but still there is hope. The issue is that since every country has changed according to the changing times, according to the changing fortunes, and they've capitalized on those. But when you look at the index, and yesterday also I mentioned in the program, that when you look at the index of those 79 developing countries, the top 10 were either from the Eastern European side, whether it's Latvia, Lithuania, or it's Hungary, or it's Romania for that matter, or you look towards the Latin American countries, you'll see Uruguay, you'll see Costa Rica, you'll see Peru, Chile for that matter. So things have changed there as well, though there are small economies as well. But what is the reason for that? What sort of a model are they using? So that is going to be another question in our today's program. And then you look at the significance of this particular forum where almost 3,000 various CEOs and managing directors are attending. This is the place where you try to convince the foreign investors to have a look about your country, at least to read about it, and you market and you present your case to make sure that the economic growth is sustained, is maintained also. To talk about that, we have with us in our studio on my right is Begum Abida Hussain Saiba, former ambassador, former Minister. Ma'am, thank you very much for taking out your time. We also have with us in our studio Omar Ayub Khan Sahab, again needs no introductions, he's from Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, former Minister of State for Economic Affairs. Sir, thank you very much. And in a little while we'll be joined in by Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Sahab, the international affairs expert. But ma'am, let's start off from you. First of all, the importance and significance of Davos. Every year the heads of state, they get together there and they exchange their views, their ideas, and there's a theme. This time it was more about the leadership. Now, first of all, ma'am, talking about the presentation of Pakistan, because things have really changed during the last 1 year or so. General retired Rahil Sharif was there as well, the former Chief of Army Staff, also presented the idea how we managed to tackle this menace of terrorism. And now Pakistan is moving in the right direction. But when you talk about the general perception, that still prevails as if Pakistan is somewhat like Afghanistan. Let's start off from there, ma'am, about the perception of the country. How important is that as far as this particular forum is concerned?
Well, it's very important because this is a deterrent for foreign investment in our country. The impression that we have terrorism as a regular feature in our lives. Now, Government of Pakistan, the Prime Minister obviously would have presented our case that the terrorism story has improved enormously. It's very peaceful. And the Chinese are bringing in $42 billion of investment with the CPEC. And this is going to open up tremendous possibilities for Pakistan to trade and to develop our economy, and our communications are going to undergo a veritable revolution. So I think that the Prime Minister should be able to solicit some interest from the foreign investors, and a strong assurance from him that the law and order situation would be maintained and that the investors don't have to concern themselves about their security, and that their investment would be safe. All of this, I'm sure, would have been asserted. Pakistan's economy is not doing badly. We're recording a 5.7% rate of growth, and we have the potential of enlarging that and increasing our growth rate. So, so let's see what the outcome is. But Davos is the World Economic Forum has become a very strong platform for exchange of ideas and perceptions.
All right. Now, Omar Khan Saab, a couple of points here now. Talking about the World Economic Forum, obviously, since you have been in that capacity where you were the Minister for Economic Affairs and you exactly know how things are tackled, how bonds are issued, how you need to value them, how to create an impression over the countries, how to increase your rating as far as the agencies are concerned. A lot has been done, a lot still needs to be done. A couple of points. First of all, we've always been hearing that, you know, this is the forum. I still remember I happened to travel with General Musharraf in 2006 to Davos. And on the way back, General Saab told us that we'll be able to fetch around $9 to $11 billion of investment that year, which we did to some extent, but not 100%. What sort of hindrances do you think? You know, when we talk, you convince, you sign MOUs, you invite people, but at the end of the day, when things need to be materialized, for some unfortunate reasons, we do not see those desired results, sir.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Faisal Saab, thank you very much for inviting me to this illustrious program and excellent panel. First of all, the year you mentioned, 2006, it so happened that I was selected as a young global leader for the World Economic Forum that year. Ms. Hina Rabbani Kar the following year, Awais Laghari the year before, Maryam Nawaz Saiba in 2014 or 15, and a lot of other people have been selected from Pakistan to the World Economic Forum. So it's a very prestigious forum to be at, and it's a very informal forum where leaders and business leaders, chief executives of the country, prime ministers, they have an opportunity to showcase their country and show what is happening in the country. For Pakistan now, there are 2-3 things we have to look at. CPEC in the context of Pakistan specific, CPEC in the context of Pakistan-China, CPEC in the context of a conduit between Africa, China, and the rest of the world. Let's touch upon each of these points. For Pakistan, they have ramped up the investment which will come into Pakistan to approximately $57 billion. Number one. What does that mean for Pakistan? These are going to be infrastructure projects. These are going to be soft projects. These are projects.
Energy projects?
Energy projects. These are projects which is going to be a conduit for furthering investment in Pakistan. Number one. Number two, it's not just Pakistan specific. We must realize that China over the years, I had the honor of giving a presentation in Gilgit-Baltistan at the Chief Minister's invitation in Gilgit-Baltistan. General Rahil Sharif was there, a lot of other eminent scholars and academics were there as well. And in that, I had the opportunity to basically show that China's investment in Africa since 2002 has risen to approximately $1,000 billion. If you see the map of China today, if you see the map of Africa, Chinese investments treaties across the continent of Africa, they have literally, you can say, they've enveloped the continent. And in which areas have they invested in? It's in infrastructure projects. The Chinese Investment Bank is investing there. Energy projects, minerals. Now, another important factor is Deng Xiaoping, he made a speech to the Communist Party in China in 1986-87, and he said rare earth metals will be to China what oil is to the Middle East. The Chinese today control 96% of the production and supply of rare earth metals. Where are rare earth metals used? They're used in fiber optics, stealth technology, communication, high MRI machines, CAT scan, you name it. So they are going towards high value added products.
High value added, yeah.
High value added products. The other thing is there was a train which pulled into England yesterday, and it took 19 days or 21 days all the way from China to England. They are testing a prototype in the Shanghai University of a train which is going to be called ETT, evacuation tube technology, which will travel at speed of 1,800 miles an hour. It will be in a tube with a vacuum inside, which is going to, you can do the math yourself. It's going to take from Shanghai to Moscow.
Just the way England and USA were planning that Euro tunnel.
Exactly. So we are talking of train travel in a couple of hours rather than days. So China is investing across the world, specifically through Pakistan, because it wants to cap the international markets. Why? Because American forces are sitting near the Straits of Malacca and in the Straits of Hormuz, so they want to avoid these.
These are all backup plans for the Chinese. It makes a lot of sense.
So these are backup plans. Where does Pakistan fit in? Pakistan, I think for us, it is a win-win situation. In mathematics, there's always, you say there's a point of inflection where your graph starts trending up. So for us today, in today's environment, this time period is the point of inflection where our growth rate and our opportunities are going to rise. And how do we garner that? By creating goodwill within the country, by fighting this extremism element. Why? Because our neighboring country, India, is going to try its best to destabilize Pakistan by funding terrorist activities through Afghanistan, using that as a launching pad and other activities. And the other important factor is that India will not leave any stone unturned to malign Pakistan. It's a perception issue as well.
Even they did it this time. They did it during the summit of BRICS. You talk about SAARC summit. You talk about any General Assembly for that matter. So this is their mindset. This is their approach towards Pakistan. We do understand. First of all, Dr. Saab, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Saab, we were talking about the importance and the significance of the World Economic Forum. Obviously, we did talk about what the Prime Minister said there and whom he met, actually. Now, I'll just read out something for you, because this was something very interesting, and I really want you to throw light on this. It says, 3 large models. I'm talking about it says in the twilight of the globalization. It says, 3 large models can be discerned regarding how countries dealt with the rapidly globalization world in the 90s. I'm talking the 90s. That was the time when everybody was taking off. One was Russia and its former satellites in the Eastern Europe, who embraced the shock therapy preached by the radical free market thinkers of the time and founded for almost a decade. And then the other model was China, which opened up gradually, but surely they did, according to a plan guided by the state, with state-owned enterprises leading the way. Penetrating the Chinese economy remains a daunting challenge for Western capital almost for till now. And then the third was India, which opened up for very private capital, but retained trade barriers to sophisticated mechanisms. What I'm saying is everybody had a plan, and they exactly knew, they could forecast, they could see the future. But although we are a much smaller economy, sir, we are a much smaller country as compared to these 3. But having said that, sir, do you think we did miss the train, or still God has given us another chance in the form of CPEC?
Well, I think that when you start comparing with the 90s, then the first decade of the 21st century, you should not ignore what were the challenges we were facing at that time. Those countries, for example, Chinese growth or the Indians' growth, they are very much within the time frame when they were facing no challenges externally or internally. Russians failed because they were not able to sustain the burden of their mighty power, and when they went for extra investment in the military sector and within their own political system, there was no homogeneity. So there was a different way of looking these things. Of course, we say the Marxist economy or that kind of model failed. But at the same time, when we start giving these kind of references to the Indians and Chinese economy, we have to look about their political and regional stability or their internal stability. Pakistan since 1979 to date has faced both external challenges as well as internal challenges. This is the first time that in the last 35, 36 years we start feeling that we can attract some kind of foreign direct investment. As earlier it was pointed out that with the Chinese investment of $57 billion, they are not investing only for us, they are investing for their own objectives, but in the economics terms we say it's a win-win situation, because we both states are expecting good, you can say, outcomes or positive outcomes, but at the same time we can also be careful while making these kind of the analysis. Yes, Pakistan is a big state. It is one of the, I think, 6th biggest state in a population-wise, territory-wise, 4 seasons, agriculture-wise. But the only issue in this position is where I'm looking, what is the alarming. Yes, we have opportunities. We have you can say today the time is on our side. And if we try to play our cards correctly, we are able to attract more, you can say, economy, we are able to survive, economically be prosper. But at the same time, if you see that within Pakistan, what is the main product of Pakistan? Your small industry will be going to face a challenge. I'm not an economist, but my general perception is, as a layman, and your agriculture is not,
which is supposed to be your backbone. I mean, look at Japan, look at Holland, look at so many other countries.
Yeah, if you have to become a transit between the, let's say, China, Russia, Central Asia, because of the CPEC, and on the other side, Afro-Arab world or the Africa, then you have to develop your agriculture sector, as well as to be keeping in mind that your per acre yield should also move, you can say, increase or multiply.
We've seen a negative
and these kind
growth
of
in
things.
the agriculture
and
sector.
of course, you have to see that how you bring more investment in the research and development. Unfortunately, there is a lesser focus on that. I do agree that at the moment, the trends are very positive, economically speaking, or the trends are very positive in keeping in mind the security terms that after Zarb-e-Azab or the National Action Plan, one can be be optimistic about all these kind of things. But for a long-term planning, agreed that when you have an infrastructure, it gives you an idea of a long-term planning. But our other policies or our other initiatives are matching with it?
They need to
that
be
is a
in
big
alignment with them. Now, ma'am, when you talk about long-term thinking or long-term planning or a vision for that matter, obviously that is the job of the legislators, along with that core team of the Prime Minister, whosoever is in power. Now, ma'am, unfortunately what we have witnessed over a period of time that the job that should be of a councillor for that matter is being done by the MNA, unfortunately. And that is very, very unfortunate because, as I earlier mentioned, their job is to legislate, have policies, internal policies as well as external policies. And then we talk about the changing times, the changing alignments. Now America is getting so close to the Indians for their own objectives, and it suits India as well. Chinese making CPEC one of the 6 routes they plan to have. Russia is engaging with Pakistan for that matter. New alignments are being formed in the region. And ma'am, as they say, regions grow, individual countries do not grow as such. How do you see that equation, ma'am? Now, don't you think that Pakistan, being a smaller player in the region, is playing around with much bigger elephants, I would say, in the form of China or Russia for that matter, or India or USA on the other side?
Well, you know, Pakistan is, by way of population, we're the 6th largest country in the world. We rank just below Russia. No, in fact, we've overtaken the Russian Federation in population. Pakistan has a very strategic geography. We have a coast that leads into the Arabian Sea. We have among the highest mountains in the world. We have the largest, flattest, irrigated plain which produces wonderful agriculture. And we have a talented, hard-working population. Now, between Russia and China and India, we have this very strategic geography. We're a part of South Asia, we're concurrently a part of Central Asia, and we're also a part of West Asia. I think in terms of our prospects for the future and our growth and development, we have every reason to be optimistic. And the indicator of this is that Russia, which in the past did not have a favorable relationship with us, is very keen now to develop good relations and to trade and so on. Russia is extremely influential in the Central Asian republics. So building on goodwill with Russia means that we can enter into all sorts of joint ventures with the Central Asians. You know, English has become a lingua franca.
Yeah.
And we have a fairly large competent body of teachers who can teach English. In Central Asia, this would be very possible and viable. We also produce agriculture which we can trade with them. Now, aside from this, our relationship with China has been strong for a long time. But with the CPEC and their enormous investment in our country, the relationship gets stronger.
Correct.
With India, we have our traditional hostility, but India is, in many ways, they are wary of us and our progress because India has very many problems of an internal kind, and the consolidation of Pakistan poses an indirect threat to India. Our
It
Western
poses a threat, ma'am, or is it just a mere perception when they look at Pakistan from the Indian prism,
this is their perception. When we look towards our western border, there's Iran. Iran is a country which is dynamic and it's moving upward.
Oh yes.
Since the sanctions were lifted.
Even yesterday there was a report that US has released.
Right. Their
frozen
economy
accounts
is buoyant. Now, they are energy surplus while we are energy
Thirsty.
deficient. But we have many products to sell to them. Other than agriculture produce like rice and fruits, we also have pharmaceuticals and light electronic goods to trade with them. Iran then also, you see, leads into Turkey. Now, I believe that a Turkey, Iran, Russia, China, Pakistan association and proximity would be very dynamic and challenging, and this would give a big boost to our strategic relationships and our economic ties.
Are we actually playing our cards wisely?
You know,
In order to obtain a certain objective, ma'am, you need to play your cards wisely.
I think what we've been efficient at is reducing the terrorism in our country, and this Operation Zarb-e-Azab must be lauded for that. As far as this bloc that I'm suggesting, Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, I don't think we've taken this issue up in all seriousness. One smart move that we have made is to have had a meeting with Russia and China on peace in Afghanistan.
In Moscow.
And in Moscow. And if we bring Iran into that equation, it would be useful. Collectively, we would hold the many top cards in helping the Afghans to reach a condition of peace. Pakistan has tried to float a dialogue or advance a dialogue between the Taliban and the government in Kabul. The Taliban have control in rural Afghanistan, while the government holds Kabul. So really a power sharing agreement, if they come to the table and speak in all seriousness, would not be unfeasible. And here Pakistan can play a very important role.
And even Iran is willing to do so.
Right.
They want to
so,
be a part of that deal as
keeping
well.
all this in view, we have every reason to be optimistic about future prospects. We need a more dynamic, I feel, foreign policy. Foreign policy is in sort of low profile, and it ought to be more dynamic. I think we have focused for too long on the United States of America. We need to shift our focus in our own region and have a more Asiatic vision, if you like. And as Omar pointed out quite correctly, the Chinese have a huge presence in Africa, and there's no reason why we should not also give more attention to African states.
As they say, the CPEC, I mean, primarily is not only to sort of have an access towards that side, but also to look after the affairs in the Indian Ocean, because that is going to be another very interesting area to look into.
Right.
And then you talk about Iran, emerging Iran, I would say post P5+1 formula. People believe that there are almost $200 billion ready by the foreign investors to inject. Look at the way they're buying aeroplanes from Boeing, or even 40 ATRs, or even Airbus for that matter. So they want to bring in a lot of tourism, and they have the business of precious metals, oil, gas. So you can see that that is one country that is going to grow, and they don't have any regional issues as such other than Saudi Arabia. But most probably they might be diluted over a period of time, depending what happens in the future.
In any case, you see, Pakistan can play a very important role in bringing the Saudis and Iranis into a better working relationship.
And that is going to hold key for the entire Middle East, I would say.
Right.
Now, Mr. a couple of more points. When we talk about the Chinese investment in Pakistan, that's huge. For the first time we've ever witnessed such a big amount pouring in Pakistan. Whatever form, whatever conditions are there, but at least they'll be developing, they'll be having a better infrastructure for us. They'll be generating a lot of energy. A lot of people will get jobs. So there's multiple factors associated. But the Indian concern, now they believe that for some reason, I don't know how Narendra Modi thinks, but he says that the CPEC is going to pass through their region. First of all, so please explain our viewers, what do they mean by their region? Azad Kashmir is Azad Kashmir, Indian occupied Kashmir is an Indian occupied Kashmir. Though it's a disputed territory, that's a separate chapter altogether. But Chinese, interestingly, they have dispelled Indian apprehension about CPEC, sir. How do you see that?
Well, some very pertinent questions you've raised. I'll just rewind to 1961.
Sure.
And this is something I made in my presentation as well. When Ayub Khan visited the United States at the invitation of President Kennedy, he was well received. When the visit finished...
1 week long visit.
Absolutely. When the visit finished, he was given 2 albums. One was of his visit. He gave it to his military secretary. It was put in the plane. When the plane took off from New York, he opened it. The other was of the National Security Agency, NSA, spy satellites, and they were just photographs of the KKH, under construction KKH. That was the Americans' way of saying that we are concerned about Pakistan's growing relationship
with the
Chinese. Mr. Mushahid Hussain also, he was present at the conference in Gilgit-Baltistan. He in his speech also mentioned that President Johnson told Ayub Khan that why are you befriending China, which is our enemy? And he said, no, it's for our own strategic interest. So those were the days where what we have today, it's CPEC 2. KKH was CPEC 1, and as part of that agreement at that time, we got the heavy electrical complex, heavy mechanical complex, tank rebuild factory, the Kamra F6 aeronautical complex. The other thing is that when we look at it in the greater perspective, let me just shift gears and give you and the audience a brief glimpse about China and the regional economy. China is the last stage in the Asian manufacturing process. What do I mean by that? Thailand, Taiwan, Korea, Vietnam, all these countries, they produce goods and they export them to China for the final assembly process, the final component. For example, the Apple products, your iPads, your iPhones, other electronic items.
80% of the components are made in Taiwan.
So all these things, they get shipped to China, and over there, China adds approximately 15 to 20% value addition. The other important factor is that the trade between the European Union and China is growing. That's why the railway link. The third important factor is that the Indian concern. Just today, I was seeing a photograph of IG Zafar Saab in Gilgit-Baltistan. He is showing these weapons which have been caught, which have been recovered in Gilgit-Baltistan. Nationalist or sub-regional nationalist movements being funded by India to create problems for Pakistan and increase the threat perception in the eyes of the Chinese and other countries in the world to discredit, God forbid, Pakistan.
But they already know that.
They know that, but they are going to leave no stone unturned to create this impression. Why? Because they feel...
So you believe in the future non-state actors would be used to sort of destabilize?
Absolutely. India is already doing it. They are pumping in $1.5 to $2 billion a year in Afghanistan against Pakistan. Their consulates in Afghanistan, in the Badakhshan region, you go towards the other regions north of Pakistan, in Afghanistan, the Wakhan region. They are doing this. It's not hearsay. We've got evidence, and it's been presented. The Prime Minister, the advisors
have been sent abroad as well.
They have been. Yep. So these are the issues that India is. Why is India being threatened by Pakistan? For no rhyme or reason. For India, they perceive us as a thorn in their sides. Pakistan is not doing anything to India. The core issue is Kashmir. They should solve that issue. But coming on towards the Pakistan-China relationship and India feels, as Begum Sahib has rightly pointed out, they've got tremendous internal problems of their own. Their military spending is more than all of South America combined, and it is all anti-Pakistan. It is Pakistan-specific. It's Pakistan-centric. Their Cold Start doctrine, etc., etc. Their Navy, Blue Water Navy, it's all Pakistan-centric. They're not being threatened by Bangladesh or Myanmar or Bhutan or any other country. So how do we counter the Indian threat? All we have to do is concentrate in bringing in stability within the country, in demolishing the threat being posed by these extra state actors, in bringing together the various political parties in Pakistan to come to one, to come as there was a charter of democracy, to come to one table, as Finance Minister Sardar Sahib has been saying, sign a charter of the economy. And basically
one vision policy.
One vision. This is what we are going to do, because the stakes are so high.
No matter which party is in the power, there should be one vision.
During Premier Deng Xiaoping's time, it was required reading by a lot of the people in dealing with the economy. Alvin Toffler's book, Third Wave, Future Shock. These were the books that basically they were made to read and chart out the economic policy of China as well. They had their own internal input coming in, but these are the sort of things that they were made to do, so that they could chart a course for themselves in the international economy. I think that's something we have to do, all political parties on one table, and say, this is our foreign policy, we are on board. This is our economic policy.
If anybody has any sort of an apprehension, they can talk.
And if you look at the cost of production in China, what have they managed to do? They have brought down the cost of production of a lot of products which were not in the reach of the common man. Today they are in the reach of the common man.
Mobile phone, for that matter.
Mobile phones. You've got these steep cost curves with which the cost curves have come down. The learning curves
obviously economy of scale is one factor, but otherwise cost of doing business has gone down so much.
Exactly.
And the efficiency of their labor, that's another
so for
thing
Pakistan, what is the challenge? We have to make ourselves relevant, that we should be part and parcel of the Chinese economic engine by making sure that X% of our exports goes into those products that are being assembled in China, into the value-added products. And we are talking, Begum Sahib talked about pharmaceuticals, we've got the biotechnology sector. China is one of the largest economies which is investing a lot of money in biotechnology, in genetic research, in medicine, in metallurgy,
even agriculture.
So we have to go towards that route. We've got a lot of wastage in our water system. We don't do any rainwater harvesting. These are the things which we have to basically learn and incorporate in our production of agriculture, business. And I think there's tremendous growth opportunities for Pakistan, in which our common man is going to benefit. The standard of living of the common man in Pakistan is way above that which was there about 20 or 25 years ago. I've seen it in the rural areas. We are seeing it as we go. The consumption is there.
But at the same time, still population bomb is another issue. It seems as if, when we talk about the demographic dividend, young population, but so that can become an absolute economic disaster if you do not invest in them.
That's 2035. If we don't do anything about our water resources, we'll be a water deficient. We are coming to that.
Next war could be with India on water issues.
1 billion cubic meters, which is equivalent to the 66% of the annual flow of River Indus. That will be our water deficiency. Last point I want to make before you switch over is that the chief executive of eBay, he made a very pertinent point day before yesterday. He said Pakistan is one of the most exciting countries where a lot of demand is coming for e-commerce. What does that mean? That there is tremendous penetration of your mobile phone systems, of your infrastructure in e-commerce, and it shows that
exactly that has opened up the whole world. Now you've got internet, 4G technology, sir. If you want to buy something, initially there used to be internet frauds regarding the credit cards and all, or the debit cards for that matter. Now they'll deliver it home and take the cash away. Simple as that. A lot of people do that.
Absolutely.
And that is obviously, and that's why you see so many advertising on various social media sites. Now, Dr. one more point. Now, when we talk about the Indian and the Chinese equation, obviously trade is the most important factor. $85 billion worth of bilateral trade, which they plan to take it up to 500 in the coming years. And then look at the equation with the Chinese and the Americans and the Indians and the Americans at the same time. It's all about money, it's all about trade. If General Motors or General Electric Group, they're eyeing at India, obviously looking at a huge market, almost the size of the population of entire Europe for that matter, the middle class. So don't you think India is still and will be a very important player in the region, sir? You can't rule out the factor, no matter what you achieve from CPEC.
No, you have to take into account two things very importantly, that in the 21st century, when we look about the strategic competition, we have to take into account that strategic competition is not hindering the economic cooperation. This is the trend on the basis of which India, China, United States, they are working. They are on the one side, on the economic chessboard, they are cooperating, they have $1 billion trade, but at the strategic chessboard, they are competing. Within this context, when we try to look at, unfortunately, India is not giving up this strategic competition with Pakistan, and at the same time, it is not permitting the economic cooperation should take off. That is the one way when we try to see that why they are worried from the CPEC. Basically, as it was pointed by the Omar earlier, that the India's entire 9 corps are deployed towards us, their striking corps, their missiles capability, all these things gives us an idea.
They can't use those tanks in the Himalayas, obviously they're for Pakistan.
Only recently they tested Agni 5 and then Agni 4. Apart from that, not even a single missile, not even a single aircraft can hit the heartland from the heartland of India, strategically speaking. Yes, we understand that strategic competition cannot be ignored between the two powers, and that's where the problem started. If you see, it's very interesting. Today I was seeing that in the...
But sir, having said that, regarding the South China Sea now, that is a very important issue
I'm coming
where
back.
the Indians are supporting the international community.
No, this is very interesting. We, in sitting in Pakistan, we try to ignore some critical trends. For example, today there is a forum going on in India or New Delhi where the Chinese have a presentation there. So in that context, they are not ignoring their economic win-win situation. In this context, when you are looking, yes, last year was very critical. A, first Indians announced the Indo-Pacific strategy. B, they went for this, what you call it, sharing of the bases with the Americans. They signed the agreement and they gave up their decades-old non-aligned and they became an ally within that. And the third was in December when there was a defense, what we call it, defense pact kind of a cooperation, major state cooperation agreement was signed. From that onward, we started looking that India is now giving a space. Now the issue is the American asked the Indians to participate in the monitoring of, or you can say navigation checking within the South China Sea. India refused. India is also playing card very carefully, but the limitations of the India are exposed because there is a very interesting situation. Americans have from 1945 till today, the allies which were dealing with the Americans, they were dependent for their survival on the United States. India is the first time an ally which is not dependent for its survival on the United States. So Americans are also confused. It's not easier for them to deal with India. Similarly, what India was looking, India was thinking with the economics or with the support of the United States, India would emerge as a great power in the world. Yes, Americans said in 2010, Hillary said that India is a great power, but practically India is incapable to, you can say, even compete, you can say, snub Pakistan, because militarily speaking or strategically speaking, or at the strategic chessboard, Pakistan is capable to deter India's aggression. And that's why sometimes you hear like surgical strike, but then it's what you call a farcical surgical strike. Sometimes you hear that, oh, we don't have a cold start, but in the first week of January, what the Indian chief weapon said that we have a cold start doctrine. So these kind of things, they are more rhetorical. Where India is more investing, and there I think India has an advantage even today, that India is exploiting the Afghanistan situation, because in the last 15-16 years, the Afghan intelligence agencies, all training took place within India because with the support of the American or the international community.
Is stable Afghanistan suits India?
No.
As long as their objective is to make sure that Pakistan stays
where I'm saying, they are trying to exploit the internal fisheries of the Pakistan. They wanted to, you can say, cap on this, what you call it, exploit their sectarian cancer in Pakistan or ethnic, but where we are able to manage it, there they try to fill it, or you can say intervene it, and there they are using the Afghanistan. If the Afghanistan is stable, definitely these sanctuaries would be not there. Definitely their intelligence agencies, their other law enforcement agencies start behaving. Definitely there will be no traffickers, there will be no
Sir,
Al-Qaeda,
when
there
you
will
talk
be no
about
Daesh,
the
and
element of
definitely these
Daesh,
things
we
will
all
be-
know there was this concept of rebels fighting against the Syrian army. If you remember, sir, initially, then certainly those rebels were supported by the French, by the British, and obviously by the Americans. And there's a joke, how come they have Humvees, rather, these Hummers worth $1 billion. So obviously long droppings are the wrong. A C-130 can do it once, but not like 100 times. My point is, you all know that who's supporting who. And now there was this element that there could be, though we have been denying it for a very long time, but there could be a very strong presence of Daesh, because these non-state actors do not have a religion. From where they'll get money, they'll fight for that cause. They don't want to even know at times what the cause is. So there could be a presence of Daesh, and obviously that is the reason the Russians, obviously they have a softer belly. They want to engage the Chinese and the Pakistanis to sort of sort out the issue. This is the first time. We've also learned that there is a possibility that there would have been a meeting between the head of the Taliban and Mr. Vladimir Putin. I'm not sure, not confirmed, but there were reports. What I'm saying is that they do understand the concern. So if there is, for example, let me rephrase my question, ask you this question before I move on to ma'am, and I'll put the same question. During the last decade or so, post 9/11, what we witnessed, that it was a unipolar world. Americans did whatever they wanted to do, whether Iraq, Afghanistan, you name it, and they were there. Certainly, annexation of Crimea, the Ukraine issue, the Syrian issue, the Aleppo control, and today we have learned that Eastern Mosul is also under the control of the Iraqi army. What I'm saying is, the Russians, they had put their foot down. Are we moving towards a bipolar world?
No,
or maybe a tripolar world for that matter?
No, Faisal, we have to not ignore two things. Russians from the very beginning, they didn't give up their, you can say, claims on their backyard. For example, in 2008, when there was a partnership of Georgia with the NATO, the Russians captured 2 provinces. Not even a single country protested. They were not able to. Then they went to Crimea in December 2015. They went.
There was
to
a
Syria.
referendum, sir.
They went to December 2015 in Syria. So Russians are asserting on that side. In this case where you are looking at the Daesh, the problem with the Daesh, Al-Qaeda, people in our part of the world who are working with the Daesh or Al-Qaeda, they are same kind of under the influence of Slavi, Wahhabi thinking, and basically this Deoband within our own, these kind of the mixture. We cannot label one, but this is the mindset which you find in the Daesh. The people who are joining with the Daesh, who are joining with the other, who are the...
They have a similar chemistry.
Yeah, it was the part of this, what we call it, transnational terror syndicate. But the problem where the Russians are afraid, because they're soft belly, they're Chechen, they're, you can say, Dagestan, the movements there coming within Central Asia, and then they are coming with the Afghanistan, they are same mindset.
All these Muslim
and the
majority
only
areas.
the difference is that the Daesh or the Islamic State, it has announced Khilafat. And in our part, it's a normal practice. That if I want to do a crime, I try to say, oh, I am with that, and with the Khilafat, it gives me more, you can say, allegiance. So announcement of the allegiance with the Khilafat, that is a different part, and that's why Russians are worried.
Right.
But we have to be very careful. These groups are exploited. For example, in my country, Jandullah, Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, who are exploiting it, from where the money is coming. Their money is coming from the internal, external sources.
Yes.
So we have to be very careful. If we control this supply of money, you are able to control 80-90% of the crime.
Absolutely. Ma'am, I was just told that we've got a few more minutes left, but I just want a very random point. When you do the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, threats and opportunities, where would you rate Pakistan, ma'am, in 2017 onwards?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, that we have very good future prospects. You mentioned something which is important and needs our attention. That's our unbridled population growth rate. We have to correct that and reach population stability. Other than that, in terms of trade, in terms of strategic connections, in terms of productivity, we're in reasonable shape. And if we look at it this way, that from North Africa, across the Middle East, up to Pakistan, leading into Central Asia, all of this contiguous terrain is populated by Muslims. And among the Muslim people, we are in many ways perhaps the most advanced. We are a working democracy, first of all, and we have well-trained.
Only country to have seaports.
That's right, and
Connectivity.
also we have a well-trained manpower from our labor right up to our academics. There are a lot of highly educated and well-trained folk in Pakistan. We are very skilled in our artisanage, and then we have tremendous touristic possibilities, a lot to offer to visitors by way of monuments, by way of our folklore, by way
lot
of
of
our
attraction in
natural
Pakistan,
beauty
basically.
and so on. So all of this, I think, stands for a dynamic future.
So you're pretty optimistic about it. Sir,
Very optimistic, win-win situation. What we have to do is get the regions in Pakistan, the provinces and the regions, Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, Balochistan, KPK, Punjab, Sindh, all the population of the hinterland, of the rural areas, they must be plugged into the economic progress
Integrated.
of the country, integrated, where they have a stake in the well-being and prosperity of the country, where they say, yes, I am
so would you
prospering.
think, would you say that was our weakness at one time? Could be turned into an opportunity now?
That is exactly what India is trying to leverage. And that is both a strength, an opportunity, as well as a threat, which we have to reduce this regional disparity. That is something we have to work towards. And
We
everyone
have
has
to work, but are we working on those lines?
we are working towards it. We are working towards it, and we have to do even better, number one. And that's why we have to come towards the Charter of Democracy, which the Finance Minister has been time and again saying. Number two is that about Russia you mentioned. Russia, you can liken it to a bear. A bear hibernates and then comes out renewed. Third question you asked, Faisal Saab, is it a bipolar world? I think militarily we can say it's a tripolar world. Russia, China, United States. Economically speaking, we can say it's a quad power world. European Union, United States, China, Russia. And then other countries, for example, Pakistan's countries like us, we are going to be the countries which are going to be plugged into the economies of China and Russia. Why? Because from Kashgar to Shanghai, they've got a high-speed railway network which is functioning as we speak, which is going to be plugged into Moscow, and then the relationship between Germany
All the way up
and
north,
Russia.
yes, yes.
That
They'll be connected with the
the-
Siberian side.
The Siberian side. And there are a couple of routes. So for us, it's a win-win situation, both as our industry, our agriculture, our services sector being linked into these economies, as well as giving them a way through our ports to the landlocked countries of Central Asia.
Dr. Saab,
I'm sorry, last point. The income disparity between Eastern China, Shanghai, and Western China or Urumqi, it's 12.1 times.
Correct.
That's if a person earns
And they want to create a balance there as
and
well.
If a person earns $1 in Kashgar, he earns $12.5
In Shanghai.
In Shanghai. So that's what they want to also.
that's why they're
reduce.
putting in so much money in the western
resources.
side, sir.
Exactly.
I think that trends are very much positive, and on the basis of that, one can be optimistic. But I can use the word cautious optimism, because in my neighborhood, the new great game is taking place, and definitely we cannot ignore it. Secondly, within the state, there are institutions are not functional. If you see our civil bureaucracy, if you see our educational system, especially governmental educational system, they require a lot of attention.
Public-private partnerships, that's another
No,
issue of concern.
I'm just simply saying public-private partnership are different, but these two areas require a lot of, you can say, attention. Without reforming them and without, you can say, building them to meet the challenges of the
harvest
21st
without
century.
preparing the ground,
Yeah,
sir.
then
You
you,
need
are
to
not.
prepare
And
the ground first.
unfortunately, finally, our soft power capabilities are not matching our challenges which
Soft
we are
power
facing.
and smart power, I would say, sir. You need anyway, Dr. Saab, thank you very much. Omar Saab, was a pleasure, ma'am. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you at 8 tomorrow. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.